The year is 2001. We have just seen a rough cut of a little film called The Fellowship of the Ring. And one does not simply fix The Lord of the Rings. But we're going to. Cue that intro. Hello everyone, welcome to the Mirror Movie Universe podcast. I'm joined today by my good friend, the godfather of my firstborn, Brian. How are you, Brian?
Hello, my name is Brian. I'm here to be with my friend Dan. We're going to talk a little bit of Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Some J.R.R. Tolkien today.
Yeah, Stephen Colbert wasn't available, so Brian is here. He knows the most about Lord of the Rings out of anyone I know.
Oh.
Read it a bunch of times, I'm guessing?
Yes. Yeah. At least the trilogy I've read several times. Which is interesting in this podcast, because this will be the first time, to my knowledge, that we're doing a Mirror Movie Universe podcast that has from a movie that has source material.
Yeah, that's true.
So that'll be a really interesting dynamic in terms of like how we talk about the movies, what we like about them, and what we ultimately would fix about them. Because we're addressing the movies, not necessarily the source materials from which the movies are derived.
Very true, very true. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, we basically take on the role of time-traveling movie producers, so we're not here to completely remake the movie. We've seen a version of it very similar to what you see, and we're just here to make a small little fix, a little change here or there that could make the movie drastically better. And that's, of course, we enjoy these films quite a bit, so we're probably not going to change much. We'll see. But before we talk about what we like, talk about what we would fix, we need to talk about what happens in The Fellowship of the Ring. So, Brian, what happens in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring?
Yeah, so The Lord of the Rings, I won't talk too much about what J.R.R. Tolkien sort of imagined when he was writing these stories, but they are essentially a mythology in the highest sense of the word. It begins with the Shire, this beautiful land of very small people who are not magnanimous. These are not ambitious folk. They love things that grow from the earth. They love partying and drinking beer and singing songs, and they love living their own lives in peace and tranquility.
They're called hobbits.
These hobbits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should mention the name of these little small folk. So they open up in The Hobbit. They open up in Hobbiton, and particularly the Shire, a smaller part of Hobbiton, where Bilbo Baggins has a ring that he has acquired earlier, that you find out later on in the movie he got from a creature called Gollum. He has this ring, and it's given him very long life. Ultimately, he passes that ring on to Frodo, and when it is in Frodo's possession, they realize that it is the Ring of Great Evil, the greatest evil object in all of Middle-earth. Gandalf shows up. He says, "Frodo, this ring is evil. We have to get it away from here. Everyone's coming to look for you, to kill you and steal the ring." So Gandalf sends off Frodo. He goes with his best friend Samwise, and they together begin traveling away to go meet up with Gandalf later on. They are met up with two friends of theirs, actually cousins of Frodo's, and the four of these hobbits then continue their travels. Along those travels, they meet a man called Strider, who we find out, this is no big reveal, but we find out he is the future king of Gondor. Then they thought the line had been broken, but they find him along the way. He helps them as they travel over to meet up with the elves. When they meet up the elves in a place called Rivendell, they have a council. The ring is now there. Gandalf meets them, and among all of the wisest men of Middle-earth, they discuss, what do we do with this ring? How do we get rid of it? Or what should we do with it? They ultimately decide there's nothing they can do with it. It must get destroyed. They don't know who's going to carry it, though. So ultimately, Frodo decides, he volunteers himself that he will continue with the ring. He'll carry it along with his three companions. And then several other men, elves, and dwarves volunteer to create the Fellowship of the Ring, hence the namesake of the movie. And the 9 of them together are the Fellowship of the Ring, sworn to protect Frodo as he seeks to destroy the ring. Then they go about their adventures. Along those adventures, Gandalf ultimately dies. He falls off a cliff while fighting a Balrog.
Giant fire demon.
Yeah. They continue on very sadly with Gandalf. They meet a beautiful elf, the most beautiful in all of Middle-earth, named Galadriel. And Galadriel sort of helps them, aids them, gives them each a special gift, and then they move on with their travels. The movie ends, ultimately, with Boromir, one of the Fellowship, who is the son of the Steward of Gondor, trying to take the ring, trying to kill Frodo. He is unsuccessful. Frodo escapes, but then Frodo realizes that the Fellowship is going to be torn apart. That if he stays there, he won't have protection in the Fellowship. That they'll actually, from inside the Fellowship, try to kill him and take the ring. Mm-hmm. So he leaves on his own. However, because loyalty is such a great virtue, his best friend Samwise goes with him. And continues with his promise to stay with Frodo to the very end, and Samwise goes with him, and the two of them leave to go destroy the ring in isolation from the rest of the Fellowship. Mm-hmm. Boromir dies in battle. There's a wonderful moment with him and Aragorn, that I'll discuss when we get to things that we really love about the movie. But he dies, and then the two other hobbits are taken captive by orcs, by actually Uruk-hai. That's right, by the Uruk-hai, and then the three other men, the elf, the dwarf, and Aragorn, the future king, go and seek to try to save them. And that's where the movie concludes.
Yes. So quite a lot happens in The Fellowship, and it's a 3-hour movie. I'm sure that Brian left out a bunch. You can comment for everything that he missed.
Yeah, so much.
Just write it all down.
Really tried to get to the highlight reel. I definitely skipped some major parts, like the Mines of Moria, and
yes.
I did so much that I skipped over. But I tried to hit at least the major plot points. Weathertop, really important point that I didn't get to, but you know.
Yeah. So anyway, so now we got to talk about what we like about it. I'll go first since you did such a good job. I'll give you a chance to catch your breath.
Thanks. Yeah.
First off, I think we have to say how amazing it is that Peter Jackson was able to get these films made. Mm-hmm. So the Lord of the Rings movies are all filmed at the same time, back to back to back, released 1 year apart. That's phenomenal for any studio to greenlight you making 3 films without any success.
Yeah.
So originally he wanted to make The Hobbit. I don't know if you know this. He wanted to make The Hobbit, and then his pitch to the studio was, if The Hobbit is successful, will you please greenlight 2 Lord of the Rings movies?
This I knew, yeah.
That I can shoot back to back. Well, they couldn't get the rights to The Hobbit. It's kind of like how, Disney can put Spider-Man in their movies, but they can't make their own Spider-Man movies thing. So anyway, couldn't get the rights to The Hobbit, got the rights to Lord of the Rings. Goes to the studio and says, will you greenlight 2 Lord of the Rings movies? Studio says, no. It's got to be 1 Lord of the Rings movie. He says, well, if it's just 1, I got to make it 4 hours long. They say, no, 2 hours long. So he goes to New Line Cinema, and he says, will you please, greenlight these 2 Lord of the Rings movies? And they say, sounds like a trilogy to me. And that's why he was able to do it. This is unknown, unheard of.
Unprecedented, yeah.
Never been done before. Fantastic that he was able to do it. I love the way that this movie is shot. And there are a couple really big call-outs for me. It focuses a lot on Gandalf's face to show you what is happening. And probably the best example that I have of this is in that council when they're saying, who's going to carry the ring? Who's going to carry the ring, right? It's Frodo who stands up and says, I'll take it. But the camera doesn't show you Frodo in that moment of triumph. Mm-hmm. The camera shows you Gandalf's face, and you hear Frodo say, I'll take it. And you see, and Ian McKellen does such a good job of this, he's just crestfallen because he knows the burden that is putting on Frodo. It's probably the most beautiful little moment in the whole thing, shot so beautifully that you just see his face like crushed in defeat because he knows the immense burden that Frodo is going to have to take on that. There are other moments, too, at the beginning when he's looking at the ring and he's trying to determine what's happening and it's just focusing on his face. And there's so much that is conveyed through Gandalf in this film. Absolutely fantastic. Because these films are shot back to back to back, there are a lot of things that I love about them that stay the same from one to the other. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to save some of that to get into when we get to the other 2 films. But I really wanted to call out the Mines of Moria sequence. Mm-hmm. It is such a great sequence. It is so well paced from the they get into the mines, and there's the whole battle with the sea creature outside, to them finally going in, and they think that they're going to be safe, and Gimli is so excited. Oh, you get to see the dwarven hospitality and all of these things. And then they get inside and they realize that's not the case, and they're reading the last entry, the drums are pounding, they're coming, they're coming. Yeah. And you so feel powerful. This dread, and then they have this fight. They're surrounded now by these orcs or goblins or whatever it is they are, and then there's this Balrog, this giant fire demon that comes out, and Gandalf makes that ultimate sacrifice with his "You shall not pass." The best meme out there from Lord of the Rings, and then even more, I think, poignant than that is when he's hanging off the cliff, and he just says, "Flee, you fools!" And he falls, and then they all go and they mourn his death. And then the very last thing I'll say, you talked a lot about Boromir's death, which is so fantastic. But he redeems himself in that moment.
It's my favorite scene in the whole movie.
Because he dies saving Merry and Pippin.
That's right.
Yeah, which is phenomenal. And in the book, I know that there's a lot of discrepancies. That's okay. I love the movies. In the book, there's this great line where it says, he was not able to save the hobbits, but he was able to save himself. Because he does, redeem his soul with his last actions there. So that's everything. That's a lot. I wanted to give you some stuff to talk about. What do you love about the Fellowship of the Ring?
So there's so much that I love about Fellowship. And in a lot of ways, Fellowship is my favorite of the trilogy. I'll get some of that, if we talk about the other movies in the future podcast, but the Fellowship really doesn't have epic battle scenes in the way that the future movies do, so you get a ton of character development. It really, you get to know who Aragorn or Strider is. You get that real sense of how deeply loyal Samwise is to Frodo. And you see that later, but it's all, you're given the fertile soil for it in the Fellowship of the Ring. I'll speak briefly, because that is probably my favorite scene in the whole movie, when Boromir dies. He's in this situation because he betrayed Frodo. He betrayed the Fellowship. And he knows it. So he knows he's committed this great sin against his friends and against his own word. He sinned against himself, if nothing else. And he admits this. He sort of confesses it to Aragorn. So he looks up at Aragorn. He's now shot. He's mortally wounded. He lays down, and Aragorn puts the sword on his chest. And he says, no, you've died loyal. You've saved these hobbits. And Aragorn offers him a kind of absolution. It's this beautiful scene of like Dan said, redemption of his sort of fall, and then his redemption back to the man he was before. And he gets to die a warrior's death, but also a man not marred by his own transgressions. So it really is just a wonderful scene in the book and in the movie. I think Peter Jackson really captures it wonderfully. So many other things that I love about it. They capture the Shire, the simplicity and the beauty of the Shire really well. Peter Jackson's sense of epic cinematography comes out in so many ways in Fellowship. He picked really well. I think we haven't even spoken on the landscape or the location of filming, but I cannot imagine. I know that the shortlist for where he was going to film it was either Scotland or New Zealand. And he himself is from New Zealand, so it was sort of an obvious choice. But New Zealand also has this sort of massive contrasts of landscapes. They've got valleys, they've got snow-capped peaks, they've got seas and oceans, and they've got all the different areas that really set this perfect world of Middle-earth. It really is it's so well chosen. And there's so much more that I could go on. Galadriel. I think they capture the beauty of Galadriel so wonderfully. The way that she is this transcendent figure, this one that they don't anticipate meeting. They come across her as they're walking through the woods of, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the forest that she's in. It'll come to me in a moment, as soon as we finish filming. But yeah, as they come across her, in her forest sort of fortress that she has, they find this wonderful beauty in this woman, and they're all struck by it. They're all moved by this to silence. It's so interesting that our relationship to beauty comes out in a wide range of ways. But you can see that in all the characters, they know to just fall silent, to bow their heads before this like beautiful, seemingly perfect creature. And then she has this moment of temptation. This moment where she's drawn to the ring and she wants to become, you see this picture into her own soul and you think, oh, this is this perfectly beautiful woman. But even she's tempted to steal the ring for her own, to become the most powerful queen where everyone will desire her in despair, she says. And it's just a really interesting thing. And then she doesn't obviously take the ring. But she knows that she'll now fade, that her time in Middle-earth is now over. And it's just, I think, a really powerful scene. And then she gives them all each a gift that's fitting to each one of them based on what's going to happen in the future. They don't know, why they're given each of these gifts, but each one is very important and is useful in each one. And I know we're not talking about the books, but one of my favorite things about it, in the movies, Samwise is given like elven rope. It's his rope. And they do, in the books, he does mention like, oh, he likes rope, and he sort of talks to one of the elves about rope. But that's not the gift that he gets from Galadriel. He gets one acorn from her forest. This one acorn, and she tells him, like, if you make it through this, if you survive, you can plant this acorn and you'll get one of these beautiful trees. And it represents hope throughout the whole story. The entire thing, Sam carries this acorn. Even we're not going to get into Return of the King yet, but even when all hope is lost, he keeps the acorn because it represents hope beyond hope. And she offers that to him in this beautiful moment. So there's so much great things that are happening in the movie. So
yeah.
And
I think that it speaks to how faithfully Peter Jackson adapted that source material. A lot of times people get we're going to adapt this book into a film and they do something completely different.
Yeah.
He's very, very, and I know that people are going to be nitpicky and say, well, the thing.
So where's Tom Bombadil? But yeah.
But he does a really faithful job.
You could tell, like throughout the entire movies, this is coming from a person who loves this story.
Yeah.
Who did so much to try to capture the magic of these stories that I think anyone who's read the books already loved. And now we get the movies that everything we imagine, like, what would this be like if we saw this in real life? And Peter Jackson's like, I got you. Like, let me show you. And he just, it's absolutely perfect. So
yes.
Not absolutely
perfect. There are some things to fix. I think, we're going to get a little bit nitpicky with this maybe. And I do think that there are some problems with pacing. I'm surprised you said this was your favorite one. My favorite one's a different one. We'll get to it. I think that there are some pieces that are a bit rushed, like when they're traveling to Mordor, they say, oh no, there's spies coming, and then all of a sudden they're at the top of a mountain and it's snowy, and then all of a sudden they're to the mines. I wish that there was more time, if this was a mini series or something, you could take time, you could explore that, you could get a little more interplay between characters and stuff. Instead, that's just bang, 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 and suddenly you're there. But my fix goes back to a bit earlier in the film. If you recall, Gandalf says, I will meet you at the Prancing Pony.
Yes.
And then he's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And you as the audience have seen him kind of dueling with Saruman. He's captured this evil white wizard and everything. And then the last thing you see of him, he's trapped in the tower. Frodo gets hurt, right? And then Aragorn's girlfriend, Elf, decides to save him. She does the whole thing on the horses, and the river comes and everything. He wakes up, Gandalf is there. And as an audience member, then we go back and we see what Gandalf went through, how he escaped. The problem is, as an audience member, I don't feel any tension or dread or anything for him because I just saw him.
Mm-hmm. I
know he's fine.
Yeah.
So my fix would be just rearranging a couple scenes there so that when we wake up with Frodo, we still see Gandalf, but I want to take out everything that happened before. So that the last thing we see of Gandalf is he's riding off to Saruman. That's it. He's just going to go see a friend. You don't know if he's having a great time with this friend. You don't know if he just lost track of things, if he got caught up in something. You don't know. And then he recounts how he finds that Saruman was evil. And then he gets captured, and then he escapes with the eagles. And it builds that story. It's a little story within a story then at that moment. And I think that just in the film, it paces a little bit better, and it gives a little bit more for the audience to feel there. Because the whole time that scene plays out, I'm like, I know he escapes. he's sitting there.
Yeah.
He's sitting there with Frodo. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. So, that's my fix for the film. Brian, what do you think?
So yeah, there are several things. I agree with your pacing point, because I think oftentimes it feels really rushed and then it dials back. And some of that is to sort of capture the audience, to give the audience a little bit of a break. Like, you can only hold the tension so long. We've all seen the movie Gravity, where that holds the tension forever. But he gives us little breaks where we can, catch our breath, sort of feel good again. But with that, actually, it's funny that you mentioned the pacing, because that's also my fix, but later on. So when they actually go and visit Galadriel, Frodo knows, and so does Aragorn, because Frodo knows because he studied all the maps from being with Bilbo, but Aragorn because he's traveled most of Middle Earth, that they both know this is the last time they'll get rest. Like, this is the last oasis before the plunge. There's nothing left. Everything else is like the wild adventure. And that, I feel like they didn't capture that quite. Like, they sort of made mention to it. Again, they're sort of being sent off into their canoes. But this is the last place where they're going to get any kind of real rest, where they can sleep well and not look over their shoulder. And that wasn't quite obvious in that. So with that same thing, each one of these rests that Frodo gets, he gets one at Rivendell. He doesn't really get one at Bree when he meets Aragorn, Strider, then at the Prancing Pony. Even then, he's still being chased, but he gets these little moments. And I wish that they had let those moments linger. Mm-hmm. I wish they had let those moments sort of settle in. Yeah, and that's even that, right? So I struggle with this because it's a critique somewhat of the cinematic representation of what I know is in the book, mm-hmm. and not necessarily of the movie itself. And that's no critique of Peter Jackson. It feels almost unjust for me to ever attempt to critique what I think are near perfect cinematic representations. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that was like that sense. And I would say, like, in that same vein, at Rivendell and at Galadriel's, oh my gosh, I keep wanting to say Fangorn Forest, and it's not Fangorn.
Is it Numenor?
No, so Numenor is the dead kingdom from before. That falls in the Second Age. So yeah, but when they're at Galadriel's, all of them are studying and using the collective amount of wisdom that they have, and that sense of wisdom, I always felt like yeah, you can see they're like discussing almost like bureaucrats, like, maybe this area, maybe that area. But no, it's all of their collective wisdom of 3,000 years of living on this Middle Earth, and knowing what it's like, and deciding, like, what is the best route to destroy this great evil, mm-hmm. to destroy evil itself. And there's tons of time that's spent just learning and considering and being wise. Mm-hmm. And that's why, like, in moments where Gandalf falls and he's like, "Fly, you fools!" And he's like, "We've already discussed this. You know to run. Now be wise, you idiots. Like, go." And there's this real sense that, like, wisdom is what's guiding them more than even courage or bravery. Mm-hmm. And I thought that could have lasted longer, even at the Council of Elrond when they're in Rivendell. As they're discussing, Gimli loses his I guess doesn't lose his temper, but he tries to, like, let's just destroy the ring right now, and his axe breaks, and Boromir's like, no, this is a gift, let's take it, let's go fight our enemy with it. Mm-hmm. Everybody's sort of they're not contributing to the conversation right now. It's Elrond and it's Gandalf. Mm-hmm. And to a much lesser extent, even Aragorn. And they're deciding, like, we have this thing, and it's fallen into our lap, so to speak. What do we do with evil? And what do good men do when they come across evil? And that's the real question. What does a good and wise man do when evil is now put in front of them? And that I would have really liked to see that played out a little bit more. Yeah.
Make the movie even longer. That's Brian's face.
Yeah, well, I could have watched it for even longer. If they made 6 hours each movie, I would have loved it. So, yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Well, that takes us to the end of the Fellowship of the Ring. So please sound off in the comments. What do you like? What do you think needs to be fixed? Do you like mine, where you kind of changed up Gandalf's kind of reveal about what happened? Do you like Brian's, where we spend a little bit more time with Galadriel in the forest and we get a little moment of rest before continuing on? What else do you have that you want to say? Put it there. Please like, comment, and subscribe, because we're going to be doing the Two Towers next. As always, we hope this finds you well. Thank you, Brian. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys soon.